Kitco News special coverage of the 31st Global Metals and Mining Conference is brought to you by Gold Terra.
Hello and welcome to Kitco News with me, Paul Harris. We're at the BMO Metals and Mining Conference in Florida in the United States. And today we're talking about copper this morning. And for that, I'm joined by Michael Jones, President and CEO of Los Andes Copper. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. And you're no stranger to the event. Just in our comments before we started filming, you mentioned you've been to all 31 of the BMO Metals and Mining events. How many people can say that?
I don't know, but I think a few. I mean, it goes back to a ski trip, actually, by predecessor companies to BMO. And, the bank has always been highly supportive of the mining industry. And this conference is a great example of their stalwart support for the industry through thick and thin.
I mean, yeah, it certainly registers as the event in the mining sector at a sort of global level. Now, we're talking copper, and you're a sort of junior copper developer, a very rare breed in this day and age, but also one that's much coveted. You've got the Vizcachitas project in Chile. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
So it's a project that's been owned by the family that founded Los Andes for quite a long time. And it's been known for a long time. This is the first time that the property position's all been consolidated into one place, permitted to drill, and we can actually fully explore the asset. So it's a very exciting time for us. It's located about 120 kilometers from Santiago. It's at 1,900 meters elevation, which is unusual for a big copper deposit. But it's sitting between two very large mines. So Pelambres to the north, Rio Blanco to the south. These are big copper deposits, 70, 80 billion pounds of copper. Vizcachitas currently has a resource of 13 billion pounds measured and indicated in 1.2 billion tons of rock. So it's a true classic porphyry copper. But what really attracted me to the company to come on as CEO in October is that it's got 60,000 meters of drilling. And in my experience in the industry over 30 years, Mother Nature doesn't really tell her secrets until about 100,000 meters of drilling. And then she starts to really tell you what the key of the system is. And I think this is no different, that we're in that very exciting period where we actually really find out where the core of this mineralizing system is.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And you're going to be putting out a pre-feasibility study in the coming weeks, so you'll have a better handle and understanding of what Mother Nature may be giving you. The 2019 PEA looked at a production of about 150,000 tons a year of copper, capex of $1.8 billion. Are you expecting sort of significant changes to those numbers?
Well, we've made some significant engineering changes in the design. So the first thing is we've changed the primary comminution from a SAG mill to HPGR, and our engineers did a very good job of studying that and found that you could cut the energy consumption by about 50% and going to dry stack tailings. So the unique aspect of this particular deposit is that it gives very good material to do the dry stack filter pressing, and that's very efficient. So that cuts the amount of water we use in half as well. So those aspects of a modern mining project, as most people know, are very important to look at your energy consumption, your water consumption, and the whole attributes of the mine. And there's some new things that we're looking at that we're very excited about that can also add to those kind of dimensions of the project.
Well, one of the key themes coming out of this conference is that focus on ESG, and you mentioned some of the water and the energy aspects. So let's drill down a little bit more into that. How as a developer, how are you sort of having to position the project to respond to this ESG paradigm and to therefore be attractive to investors, to hopefully invest in the development going forward, or bigger mining companies who might like to take you out?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are very naturally attractive. First of all, it's a new project, so you can start with engineering from the beginning. You don't have to retrofit something, and you can take advantage of the changes in technology that are happening. So the two examples I just listed are examples of that. There's also some very exciting things happening in electric trucks. I was recently at the Electric Mine Conference in Stockholm and spoke with Komatsu and ABB that are working on trolley assist for trucks and being able to change the primary pit angle of the roads. This would be very exciting for the project. It saves an enormous amount of rock that you mine from waste rock in the pit. So these kind of new technology developments are something that we're going to look at expanding those attributes during the pre-feas. Our pre-feas is targeted for the end of the second quarter, but I do have a feeling it may get pushed out a bit, and that's a result of the drilling results that we're seeing. We've published a first intercept of 730 meters at 0.5% copper, and we still haven't got the bottom part of that hole in assays yet. So pretty exciting things happening around the resource itself which may change some dimensions of the project.
Okay, we're at the BMO Metals and Mining event. It's obviously an investor event. You've got 13 billion pounds of copper. Copper's been $4, $4.50 a pound for the last 2 years. Do you feel like you're a man walking around with a target on your back?
Well, I mean, the owners have been pretty clear that that even if somebody gave us $1.9 billion to build it, we're not going to do that. So, you know, the objective of the company is to maximize the value for the shareholders and all of the stakeholders, but it's not in our intention to build it. This is a company making asset for a mid-tier company that's already in production, or it's a potential acquisition target of a major, and it's big enough. I mean, I think the key attributes are it has more than 10 billion pounds of copper. It can produce more than 150,000 tons of copper a year. It's got a 45-year life. And, you know, it's a major asset that can be important to any company, really. So those are pretty rare. The other thing is that it's 53% owned by one shareholder, and there are no downstream entanglements on the concentrate itself. So that makes it a fairly unique, actually, situation.
And you're also in a neighborhood where you're surrounded by all the big guys. You've got Codelco, you've got Anglo American, you've got Freeport-McMoRan, you've got Teck Resources, you've got Antofagasta Minerals. So they're all very familiar with the area and therefore the sort of copper porphyry you've got.
Absolutely. And it's a 300 square kilometer land position. So, you know, really right now we're focused on about 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. But, you know, there are probably other porphyry copper centers along the property position. I don't think we'll ever get there to really exploring or developing those. Those are for the future. But, you know, we're just right now stepping out on 500-meter intercepts that for historical permitting reasons and fractured ownership haven't been stepped out on. So we have the luxury of being able to take a 500-meter intercept and step next to it and drill again in open ground. So that's a pretty unique situation and something that we'll see roll out in the months ahead.
Okay, thank you. Another theme that's becoming more common in the space is the talk of collaboration between different miners, collaboration in developing and building infrastructure, sharing the cost of that, and that obviously gives a reduced ESG footprint. Water's a critical issue, obviously, in Chile. Increasingly, the government wants copper developments to use seawater or desalinated seawater. That obviously means pipelines as well. Given the fact you've got big miners around you and operating mines around you, does that give you potential to collaborate on things like that or get access to infrastructure that's already there?
Obviously, water is a very important issue. We have the luxury of having water rights for more than twice the water we need. So we have 500 liters a second. We'll probably need about 250 liters a second. There are syndicates being looked at for desalination, and I think you're right. Going forward, that is something we're going to look at. But you know, for right now, we're very satisfied that we have secured the water rights we need. But certainly, collaboration is a growing thing in the industry. I agree.
Okay, looking again at the sort of broader copper space. A lot of people say the incentive price is $3.50 a pound. We're way past that, but yet we're not seeing new projects being put into production. We're not seeing a lot of M&A. What's your take on where we are in the copper space, the copper cycle at the moment? Why isn't there more activity?
Well, I think there is some activity. I mean, we've seen a couple of assets transact, and even during the presidential cycle in Chile, we actually saw a couple of deals go through at fairly impressive valuations. We just saw a deal with BHP and Filo, for example, which, you know, is at somewhere near the NAV of their project for $100 million. So there is activity starting. I think, you know, there is some commentary out there that 2023, the copper price could cool down a little bit with some new supply coming on. Personally, I think the market's going to see through that. I think there's a pretty strong acknowledgement that, you know, 2025 to 2050, we're going to end up in a real crunch for copper. I mean, the drive for electrification is on. The drive of urbanization is on. I mean, there are estimates of 2.5 billion people urbanizing by 2050. And we just don't have the metal for that, frankly. So I think the market's going to see through. During 2023, the thought process is going to be about 2025 and beyond, and that we're going to end up in a place where everybody realizes, you know, major copper reserves, typically these projects take 10 to 15 years to discover, drill off, permit, design, and so on. So there's a huge lag time of being able to get this copper into production, but the need is not going to be lagging. The need's going to come. And so I don't think that we're going to see the softness in the short term that people think, because they're going to see through to what the future looks like.
Yeah, the demand is right here, right now.
It's here now. And, when you look at electrification, it's quite interesting. If you talk about sustainables on one end, you've got small sources of energy that require a network to connect, not like a power plant with one plug. So you've got this network here. And then you talk about charge points for EVs, never mind the copper that's in the car in the first place. And you've got another network of distribution, which isn't built out. So on both ends, you have this huge fan of copper that has to happen, that the power has to transact in the middle as well. So this scale of impact of copper that's needed, again, I haven't seen any great calculations of how much that is. It's just right now, everybody knows it's a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the BHP's $100 million investment in Filo Mining. Is that the kind of strategic investment that would be appealing to Los Andes, or do you prefer, let's say, to maintain your neutrality so that you can appeal to the broad spectrum of bigger miners?
I think our general strategy is that it took many years to consolidate this position. It's a 100% owned asset. It has no downstream entanglements. It has no strategic shareholder that would be an impediment to someone coming in and taking the asset. And so that's our strategy for right now, is to drive the asset forward for value and have that somewhat unique property that it's completely clean.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Now, we mentioned you got a PFS coming out and a lot more drilling. So what will be the other main goals or things you want to achieve this year in the second half of the year?
Well, I think that the company itself has been more or less a private listed company for many years. So one of my objectives is just to get the word out to investors that this is an unknown global copper asset. I mean, it was quite interesting when I came on in October. I was told that this was a tier 1 asset. So the first thing, I went to the data room and I went all the way through the data, right down to drill logs, every hole, assays, quality control, metallurgy, pit design, everything. And yes, it's a tier 1 asset. So then somebody told me that, nobody knows about this. So I phoned a few bankers at BMO here and said, have you ever heard of Los Andes Copper? They said, never heard of it. So I think the first phase of my work is really just to make people aware of the company. I mean, we're currently trading at 0.15 times our NAV. Our peers are at 0.5 and higher. So we have a massive communication job to get this company public and get it known for the asset that it has. That's our first step. And then to just start publishing steady updates and results. And there's nothing like a 1,000-meter copper intersection to get people's attention.
Well, there's certainly companies that have put out 1,000 meters of good grade have certainly got the market's attention the last year or so. Okay, to wrap up, Michael, what can we expect to see? How would you like Los Andes to develop over the next sort of 2 to 5 years?
Well, I think the step right now is to get the mine plan to be dynamic and the resource to be dynamic. So we've got a team of engineers and geologists that are ready to respond to those intercepts. It's such a dynamic situation. We want to make sure that the market has the information about what this can do and communicate it. And pre-feasibility study engineering, a lot of it is done. But this year we'd like to see that pre-feas obviously completed and published. And we just keep communicating value and driving value. We have work to do in the community areas too, to communicate what the project is doing. We just hired somebody very senior in the mining industry. Santiago Montt came on as our chief operating officer. He's ex-head of legal for the Americas for BHP. So he's a very senior guy, and communicating locally and with government about how we're going to maximize the value of this project for all the stakeholders. That's our job over the next year.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing the pre-feasibility study on Vizcachitas as and when it comes out, Michael. Michael Jones, President and CEO of Los Andes Copper, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
And stay tuned for more from Kitco News at the BMO Metals and Mining Conference.
Kitco News special coverage of the 31st Global Metals and Mining Conference is brought to you by Gold Terra,